OC World is made possible by the generous contributions of the Marisla Foundation, the Keith and Judy Swain Family Foundation, Orange County Community Foundation, the Cordoba Corporation, and viewers like you. Thank you. Hello and welcome to OC World. I'm your host, June Kim Lopez. Chagall, Caravaggio, Monet, Rembrandt, Dali, master artists who transcend time with their coveted and priceless works of art. But how do you know when your eyes deceive you? Even the world's most renowned collectors and experts of art were fooled by a man who has been called the world's greatest living art forger. His name is Tony Tetro. His long list of admirers and victims include Prince Charles, who hung on his walls 4 Tetro fakes as part of the royal collection. Tetro went on from living the lifestyles of the rich and famous to living in a motel room in Orange County after serving time in jail for his crime. A genius in his own right, fallen but not forgotten, alive and well, still with a burning desire to regain his place in fame. He tells his story with the help of a co-author, Giampiero Ambrosi, through his new book, Con Artist. Welcome to the show, Tony and Giampiero.
Thank you, Jim.
Now, when talking with someone who is considered the world's greatest living art forger, who wrote a book with help of Giampiero, a book called Con Artist, I feel as though we need to have some ground rules. So, if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you could say pass. But I'm going to trust you that if I ask you a question and you answer, that it's the truth and nothing but the truth, yes?
Why would it be anything other?
I don't know why. I mean, you just wrote the book called Con Artist. So let's get started. How does it feel to be called the world's greatest living art forger?
Well, first of all, there's always somebody better. In fact, I know of somebody better than me.
Oh, yeah?
But he's not a painter. He does bronze heads, Roman and Greek bronze heads. He's never been caught. He's called the Spaniard. Very interesting.
But how does it feel for you?
There's always somebody better. I can't say that I'm the greatest that's living today.
Do you feel like a celebrity?
No, I don't. But the book was better than I thought it would be.
Well, if it's not about, if you don't get excited about it, why do you do it?
I'm excited about it.
Yeah?
Of course.
About the forgery or the book?
The book. The forgeries, no, I'm no longer excited about the forgeries. I do emulations. I do paintings. I should clear that up. 95% of people watching would think that an art forger copies paintings. I never copied paintings. I did paintings that never existed. So that you should know.
So what do you mean by doing paintings that never existed? I mean, these are world-renowned, multi-generation master artists. What does that mean?
That I have to study that artist and come up with a painting that he may have done. And provenance and history of when the artist did it, and owners, and sometimes the art dealers would do that themselves, but never a copy. In fact, before I was arrested, a man sold a Renoir that was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he was selling it in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. And they had him set up, the police came. But he was trying to sell a painting that existed in a museum. That's stupid, because you will get caught. So I come up with a painting that never existed in the style of Monet, the style of Renoir, the style of Rembrandt. I've done Rembrandts. But Caravaggio is my favorite, and I've done a lot of those. And I always have to come up with a painting that never existed. This one is interesting when we talk about it.
So how prolific were you as an art forger?
How prolific?
Mm-hmm.
I'm slow. So how prolific can a slow guy be? I don't know. I did a lot over the years. I did 200 Chagalls. I did I don't know how many Picassos. Hundreds, let's put it this way.
All right, before we get to that beautiful painting that's next to you, I want to bring Giampiero in. How did you get involved with Tony? What happened? How did you meet?
Well, I met Tony about 25 years ago when I was just a cub reporter. And he had just gotten out of jail. He was broke. He was living in a motel next to a Chinese restaurant. and he was really down on his luck. But when I met him, I mean, he was still full of joie de vivre, and he was, you know, really upbeat. And he had this crazy cast of characters around him. So I just met Tony, and I, you know, kind of kept hanging out with him. I loved his stories, and we would talk, and I'd learn more and more. And you know, we've been talking for a long time about doing this book, and you know, finally sat down and wrote it a couple of years ago.
How long did it take you to write his story?
It took me about 6 months. It was really fast because we had a short window during COVID when we couldn't shoot our documentary, and we just took it on the fly, and I wrung him dry with questions and interviews, and but it was quick.
So sort of as the expert of Tony, what was the most interesting or fascinating thing, or maybe even a shocking thing about his story that you want to share with our viewers?
Well, I think the thing that's really interesting about, well, there's two things. One, you would not expect an art forger to be a trustworthy individual. So the thing that I like most about Tony is that if he gives me his word about something, I know that that's rock solid. So that's kind of a counterintuitive thing. But the other thing is that, you know, everybody thinks that to be a great art forger, you have to be the greatest painter of all time. And while Tony is a great painter, there are lots of people who are great painters. The forger is somebody who is a great storyteller, who finds a little reason for a painting to exist and then breathes life into that story. So that was really interesting to me.
Is that what you were doing, Tony? Were you telling a story? Was that your approach?
There's two ways of telling a story. I had to find a reason for the painting to exist. So I had to read everything about the artist to know, oh, they made a mistake. Here I can, and I took advantage of it. Example, there's a man named Arthur M. Hind. He wrote the Bible on Rembrandt etchings. And he said something, oh, this expert says it was in the Malcolm collection, but he's wrong. It wasn't in the Malcolm collection. So I made one for the Malcolm collection. See, that's provenance. It shows that it could have existed and that Hind was wrong.
That's fascinating.
Little things like that throughout. Every artist has something like that. So when I did a painting, it had to have a backstory.
Now that is one of your many paintings, and clearly you are a talented, beyond talented artist. Why didn't you just become an original artist? Why become a forger?
Okay, I was very young. Married, I was young and dumb, and I didn't know how to be an artist. I went to art fairs. I do a Rembrandt, I do a Monet, I do a Caravaggio. Nobody bought them. They wanted something to match their sofa and spend $100 on it. I needed more money because I spent so much time on each piece. And I never sold anything. So I was in a supermarket with my wife shopping, and I saw a carousel with paperbacks on it. One was called Fake. So I read it, and I go, I could do this. I could do this. So I kind of blended into it. And if I was older, I probably wouldn't have done it. I probably would have thought about it. But I was young, and young people do stupid things. I was young
we all
and dumb.
do. Of all the ones that you've done, of all the masterpieces, what would you say is your masterpiece of all the ones that you forged? Or maybe it's not something that you did, maybe another art forger that you've seen. Is there your masterpiece amongst all forged art?
That's the question you asked was another art forger. The Spaniard, the one I was telling you about that makes the bus, they're magnificent what he did. But
going back to you.
Yeah, but I did, I don't know if you remember Ira Reiner, the district attorney of Los Angeles.
Yes.
He had one hanging.
He prosecuted you.
Yes.
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 And we'll talk about that too, because you did serve time.
Yes.
You paid your price, but go ahead.
The journalist told me it was hanging over his desk. It was called Nuclear Disintegration of the Head of a Virgin by Salvador Dali. And it was really good. But now my masterpiece is Caravaggio.
Now, Tony, one of the big news in art world right now is that there's a painting in Spain, and people are wondering if it's a true Caravaggio painting. And you decided to do your own version, which is sitting right next to you. So tell us about your process when you do your own version of a Caravaggio.
When I saw this Caravaggio, they didn't think they weren't sure it's a Caravaggio. In fact, today it's under scientific examination, and it's not a Caravaggio yet. But I saw it. This is the exact same size down to less than a millimeter. And I spent time on it. I spent a couple months painting this. Caravaggio probably did it in 2 or 3 days. He's the fastest painter in history, I think. And so I did it on old stretcher bars and canvas. And I went into detail, and it's got a patina on it. This is how it looks now. The next time people see this, it's going to look brand new, because the restorers, the conservators, are going to make it look perfect. I like it just the way it is. I have this thing for patina.
How do you make it look as though it wasn't just painted a couple of months ago? I mean, tell us about patina, because I'm not an art expert. So how do you create that effect?
Patina is very special to me. When I was young, I went to see the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and it was all covered by 500 years of sweat. And it had this beautiful green, yellow patina. A patina is age. And then I saw it after they cleaned it. It took 10 years.
You can sit and point it to us, yeah.
So this yellow, the color there is age. I do it with umber and cigarette sludge. I had a jar and I'd put cigarettes in it. And I'd smudge it on there and rub it on, because cigarettes, people smoked throughout the years. So it makes sense that there's cigarettes in it. And then umber, the paint color, I'd thin it and very lightly put it on. But these are the same pigments that Caravaggio used. They're available. And so I went.
What about the texture? I mean, some of your work have the cracking. How do you do that?
I spent a lot of time in cathedrals, churches in Italy and Rome, specifically. In Rome, and I saw a lot of Caravaggios. In fact, I saw Caravaggios in Los Angeles. They had a Caravaggio exhibit at the Getty years ago. That's about it on this. I got the same texture, so I know the texture of Caravaggio.
And you also study their signature, because you have to forge that too.
But Caravaggio never signed anything.
But for the pieces
for Chagall, of course I did.
Giampiero, do you think he's a genius?
I do. I think he's a genius forger.
Or is he a madman?
A savant.
Both. After having spent time with writing the book with him, it's a little of both.
And so it had to be quite the journey. How long did it take you to write the book from beginning to end?
It just took about 6 months. It was very fast.
Wow. Is it what you expected, the process and the experience?
It's not what I expected.
Well, I really wrung him dry, and he would sometimes get mad at me because we went into too much detail, or I'd ask him the same story over and over again, and we almost weren't talking to each other for a while.
All right, we got a lot more to talk about, so please don't go away, because when we come back, we'll have more from Tony Tetro, who has been called the world's greatest living art forger. Welcome back to OC World. I'm your host, June Kim Lopez. And I'm here today with Tony Tetro, who has been called the world's greatest living art forger, and Giampiero Ambrosi, who wrote the book about his life. All right, so going back to our conversation, one of the things I learned about you, Tony, that's so fascinating is that 95% of your work are actual emulations. So you're not copying these masterful artists. You are taking their skills, their technique, and you're creating original art. But there's a very small portion where it is sort of a copy of these masterful artwork. And there was a news in Vanity Fair 2020, I believe, that talked about one of your pieces, not through you, but somehow it ended up at Prince Charles, now King Charles's, one of royal collections. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there wasn't one in Prince Charles' collection. There were 4 in King Charles' possession now.
Okay.
4 paintings, and they weren't copies at all. They were new paintings, that completely unique paintings in the style of Chagall, Dali, Monet, and who am I missing?
Is that true?
It is true. So
I feel like you're my fact checker.
Yes.
it is true. Tony had painted these paintings, Picasso, Dali, Chagall, and Monet, for this kind of shady billionaire, and he, without Tony knowing them, put them into the collection of Prince Charles. He was using them for some big scam. But when Tony found out, he took a couple of snapshots and showed them to me, and we both thought something fishy was going on, and we ended up having about a 3-year investigation into what was actually happening, and that was the subject of the documentary that we did recently.
The story even gets better and more interesting. Now, we changed out the painting from what we saw first time. There's a new painting over there. What are we looking at?
That is one of Salvador Dali's masterpieces. I did this like 40 years ago, and it was
40 years ago.
40 years ago. I was in my secret room, and they never found my
Secret room?
Yeah, I had in my home, I had all my vintage typewriters and certificates of authenticity, rubber stamps, everything in a secret room, and I had this in there, and they never got it, so I kept it.
You should tell them the secret room could be accessed if he pressed pound and star on his cell phone. It would pop open into his vault.
And no one ever found it, including the authorities, because
25 police were
you
there.
were arrested in 1989.
April 18th, 1989, a day that I'll never forget.
What happened?
I had a gym, my own gym in my room, in my condo, and my trainer just left, and I was laying on the sofa watching television, and 25 people came, police, different departments, sheriff's department, district attorney's office. They came in.
And you did time. You actually did time.
Of course, I did time, and not my favorite time.
Of course not.
But anyway, I sold a Dali similar to this, but it was my own to Prince Charles, not to Prince Charles, to James Stunt, who in turn loaned it. He didn't sell it to Prince Charles. He loaned it to him. All these paintings that I did.
Now, you lived a great life. You moved with the jet set, with the billionaires, living the life of the rich and famous. Was a question of the fame and risk ever in your mind as you were going through the high points of your life?
Oh, that's a good question, because no, I sold to art dealers only. I didn't sell to the public. And they thought it was going to last forever. This was the golden age of art forgery. And no, I wasn't worried. I thought it was going to be forever because I was told this is going to go forever. It lasted 30 years. From the beginning to the end when I was arrested. So, but eventually, then Upstairs Gallery was a local chain in Southern California. They got busted, and we went, whoa. And then in Hawaii, Central Art Gallery got busted, and we went, uh-oh. And then, I was telling you earlier, this man sold a Renoir that was in Los Angeles, that was in the Metropolitan Museum in New York, a Renoir. He sold it to a guy, he got caught, which is foolish, because if you do a painting and it exists in a museum, what kind of provenance you have? Where did this come from? Are you selling to somebody not too bright?
So there's smart forgers and they're not so smart, and
Well,
I think you listed
I've
some
never
of that.
seen anybody that dumb.
So now, when you met him, though, he was not at the high point of his life. He was actually down in the dumps, right? You lived in a motel room, you lived out of your car. I used to remember a part in your book where you're in a minivan with all the bird poop, and you said, this is
My life.
symbolic of my life. And that's when you met him, and you're fascinated by him. Where are we now? Been high, been low. You wrote this book with him, for him. What is going on now, and what's next?
Well, the documentary called The Royal Stunt will be coming out soon, and that tells the investigation of the Prince Charles scandal that inadvertently included Tony. But I think if you ask Tony, and we will, I think his plans are to kind of pull back a little bit and start a new career.
Well,
A
I
new
still
career.
paint. I have people, I'm at home when I leave, I gotta paint. I have customers that ask me to do things.
So what's the next thing? What's the new work? What are you going to do?
Oh, I made 8 different watches. I thought about maybe I'll make watches, but they're high end, all gold or platinum. I have one on now, but I don't want to really get into the watches.
Okay. Well, we won't get into the watches, but you're still painting, and you still have
Yes.
clients.
Oh yeah, I got one painting I'm going to deliver tomorrow morning.
Why do you still do it?
I got to eat.
Now, why do these billionaires, why do these people with money, why do they
That's
go
a
to
good
you?
point. That's a good question. There's some people. One man that I had was a multi-billionaire, and he didn't want to go. I got to
try. I gotta try.
I can't.
Almost worked.
I did 99 paintings for him, all old masters and all large, and I got assistants, Koreans that I found.
Koreans, I'm a Korean.
He's got one guy I found. He's got a master's degree in art, and he was working in a mall 7 days a week. He was the hardest working man I've ever known, and he stopped and he worked for me. And then they were Korean Christians, and they were artists, and they came over and they helped me on the big paintings.
But you must get something out of this. There's got to be some excitement, some thrill, some
The only
ego,
thing,
something,
yes, of
right?
course there's ego.
Okay,
They
well,
had
tell
to be
us about that. What is?
It had to be as good as possible, and it was the aging. It was making sure everything is just right, to making sure that it would look like a Caravaggio, look like a Salvador Dali, look like a Marc Chagall, have all the elements that Marc Chagall would have in the painting, but correctly. I couldn't do something from the 30s and put a painting from the 70s. I had to be cohesive in everything that I did. And I had no idea that I was known, but apparently every art dealer in the country knew about me because I was in a restaurant and all these people came up and wanted to meet me. It was Art Expo. Do you remember Art Expo in Los Angeles?
Yes.
That stopped, it's no longer. But it was a big deal. They came from all over the world. And I didn't know that they all knew me. They were all trying to get me to do paintings for them.
Well, you're going to be more recognized now, right? With the documentary, with the book.
No.
And, just when you think about how many pieces you think you've done over the years? Hundreds. And do you know where all of them are?
Well, of course, they're like my child.
You know where they all are.
I know where they are?
All right.
No. I don't want to know.
You don't want to know. Do you know, maybe a question for you too, that in some of the most world-renowned museums and art
Do
galleries.
you think I'm going to tell you a gallery or a museum?
No, not the specific one, but do you believe
I
that
know.
your work hang in those places and people do not realize that that's a Tetro?
Yes.
Yes, you too?
I believe they're there. I don't know any specifics, but I believe they're
If
there.
I did tell you a specific,
We'll have a
it would be-
disclaimer. Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
Of course not. I don't
Because it
expect
would open
that.
up a can of worms that could not be closed.
So in the book and in the documentary, I'm sure it's a personal look at you, Tony. And having gone from the highest of highs to the lowest of low, what's the lesson that you learned, or perhaps what do you want the viewers to get from the documentary or the book?
For years, I didn't care about what happened. And then I realized after about 5 years that what I did was wrong. It didn't happen instantly. But I had a hung jury. I went back with no money to defend myself, and then I got time. But nobody ever came forward and said that they had a fake Chagall, a fake Miro, a fake Dali. And over the last 33 years, I've talked to some art dealers. And the ones that I used to work with years ago, I don't see them anymore. And I ask them, have you ever been bitten by this? And they go, no. But I'm worried about technology. The technology today is far better than it was when I was arrested in 1989. And I'm concerned that somebody might get hurt by technology, by scientific examination. So far, not. That during my trial, for example, the prosecution put big block ads in the Los Angeles Times in the calendar section, asking, do you have a fake Chagall? Do you have a fake Miro? Do you have a fake Dali? Trying to find a victim. And in my trial, there was nobody, so that's how I had a hung jury. My attorney presented that there's nobody here crying, that they've been conned, that they have been hurt. So what I want to know is that I'm not that bad of a guy and the world's going on.
Right.
33 years later.
Giampiero, do you think Tony's a criminal?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's the only thing that defines him. I mean, he committed a crime and therefore, he's a criminal, but it doesn't define him. And I think when I ask him now, he has people who want him to do stuff all the time or who teach me how to do it. And his response is always, I don't really want to bring that back into the world at all. So, yeah, no, I don't think so.
Well, it's nice to see the friendship. And it's going to be interesting to see the next chapter of both of your stories. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The wonderful thing about art is that it's very subjective. It brings about different emotions and thoughts. And there's no one that embodies those conflicts of emotions and feelings as much as Tony Tetro. You might think he's a criminal. You might think he's a genius. You may condemn him or celebrate him. However you look at it, art really does imitate life, that it's never quite the one thing, but it's how we look and interpret the beauty and sometimes the ugly side of life. But the whole tapestry is fascinating. So thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and be well.